and Nick, who's the
Assistant brewer.
assistant to the head brewer. No, assistant brewer.
He's just a brewer. So to say assistant to the head brewer, though I treat him that way very, very extensively, he's a brewer. He's just a brewer. He's not an assistant.
So we have the head brewer and we have the brewer.
There you go.
Right on, everybody. Enjoy.
So for all of you people out there who said you've never had an Excel beer, we're going to change your world tonight with some fantastic stuff. So a little bit about myself. I've been brewing for 3 years. I started out at Four Hands doing some packaging there, worked at Morgan Street, did a very short stay out in Kansas, Manhattan, Kansas at Tallgrass Brewing Company before winding up out at Excel, and I took over the brewery there about a year ago. So I'm excited to be here with you guys, and I hope that you're excited about the beer we're going to drink tonight. So a little bit about Excel. Excel was founded in 1936. That was when we actually started making pure cane sugar soda. It's still family owned. It's owned by Lefty Meyer's grandson, Bill Meyer, and we are still making pure cane sugar soda. The brewery itself, which is the part that we're actually excited about tonight, opened in 2012. That's basically what we've got going on. We've got a 20-barrel brew house. We've got a handful of 20-barrel and 40-barrel fermenters, so we can do some double batches and things like that. So that was started in 2012, and yeah, we've been going strong ever since. Sorry, I'm more comfortable making beer and talking about it to people one-on-one. So I do have some notes here just to keep myself moving. Yeah, so basically we would start a barrel-aged beer just like any other beer. The process is going to be the same. For most of you're going to know this. I do know there was a few first-timers, so maybe you're not as familiar with the brewing process, so we'll just go through that real quick. That's a sweet picture of our huge barrel-aging warehouse that we have. We generally have between 20 and 40 barrels in there. Right now we're rocking about 20. We've got 2 batches. So before we get to the barrel aging portion, we start with a regular brewed beer. So we're going to be starting with nothing but cleaning. That's our wonderful assistant over here, Nick Bafano. He does most of the cleaning at the brewery. We do run full CIP, so that's a clean in place on that tank, but there's some nooks and crannies you do have to get in there and really just scrub them out. So no beer is going to be good if it doesn't start with a clean process. So we start with that. Then we're going to move into the actual brewing process where we're going to mash the malt with hot water, the malted grains. That's a picture of our mash tun. I actually believe that might be a picture of us brewing Black Breath. So our mash tun is, normally you can see there's some steel bars coming from the center that actually stir the whole thing. We used a lot of grain on that one. So it's completely covered over. That's why we're going to be drinking some beers that are super high alcohol. You know, you're getting a lot of sugar out of a lot of that grain. So we transfer over to the boil kettle. That's where we're going to add the delicious hops. Without that, no beer would be complete. This is actually a picture that I took at Tallgrass when I was out there. So that's a little bit more hops than we would put in one of our batches. That's about maybe 3 times what we would use because they're on a 50-barrel system out there. So that's a little bit more than we're going to get in some of our brews. But from there, we're going to chill it down and add oxygen. The yeast needs oxygen to ferment the sugars that are in there. They're going to repopulate and eat up that oxygen and then eat the sugar and create carbon dioxide and alcohol. So then some beers get a little more excited than others. That was actually earlier this week. That's actually our Eastside IPA. Usually you don't have that problem with like a lower alcohol beer, but when the yeast really gets churning, you tend to see a little bit of blow off. So that's mostly just yeast that's foaming out of the top. After fermentation, we're going to transfer it. This is where the process is going to differ. So normally we would transfer directly into a bright beer tank. We would carbonate the beer and package it for wonderful people like you to consume. With a barrel-aged beer, we are going to go directly into a barrel at this point. So that's basically where the exciting portion of this talk starts, the barrel aging. That's what we're mainly here to talk about. So,
can we take a moment to see
So again, Nick Bafano, everybody. So here we go. Barrels. First thing we're going to do is we're going to order some barrels. So we've got to choose the right barrels for the right project. This is actually a picture of one of the rum barrels that we aged Black Breath in. I hope some of you are pretty excited to taste Black Breath. We just released it a week and a half ago. So they're rum barrels that we actually get in from Jamaica, and as you can see, this barrel was actually made in 1990. So it is 3 years older than our other brewer, who actually right here, yeah. So this is another picture of the rum barrels. When we bring in barrels, we're going to inspect them, make sure there's no visible cracks or anything like that. We're going to clean the outside. For a spirit barrel like this, we are not going to do anything to the inside of the barrel. We're not going to rinse it. We're not going to clean it with anything. We are just going to go ahead and make sure it looks like it's a sound barrel, and we're going to put it on its side and pump beer right into it. The main reason that we want to do that is, so basically there's a lot of risk of infection when you're dealing with barrels. Obviously, you see everything else is this nice, beautiful, clean stainless steel, very controllable environment. When you start going into the barrels, you really run the risk of infection and losing product. I don't care what brewery you're at some point, you're going to lose a barrel or two. It just happens. Some people like to steam barrels when they come in. Some people rinse them with hot water. We just go directly in and assume that the spirit that was in there previously sanitized the barrel enough, and we don't want to lose any of that character going into our product. So that's kind of our take on the first use barrels. So again, some people will swell the barrels with that hot water, and that's going to stop any leaks. Like if you got a barrel that's coming in a little bit drier, we try to source very, very wet barrels that still have some of the actual alcohol in them from the previous spirit that was in it. As you can see here, we got some leaks going on. Basically what's going to happen is over time the beer itself will swell that barrel. So we just go ahead and put that right in, let it leak for a couple days, maybe a week, and then we go ahead and put it over in the barrel cellar to clean off the outsides to stop any again, risk of infection. That's kind of the biggest problem you're going to run into here. Rye Day? Oh yeah. Well, they're gonna bring it to us. They're gonna make it happen.
We're getting close to getting you guys.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Apparently the bottles are child-proof.
And we will speak on that towards the end. That's in the packaging process. So for first use barrels, we're going to go right into them, not clean them at all. We do use our barrels more than once usually, and we will taste some beers in a little bit that are actually second use barrels. We will give the barrel a very hearty rinse with 180-degree water just to minimize any chance of infection. Basically, our idea there is if the beer coming out was good, we're going to assume that it's a good barrel, and we're going to reuse that at least one more time. So for our first use barrels, we're going to age those between 3 to 6 months. We're not looking for a whole bunch of age on the product. We're mostly looking to pick up a lot of that spirit character and a little bit of the charred, a little bit of the oaky character, but that's going to be minimal in that short time. You think of like wines and things like that they age for, maybe a couple years or something, or obviously like a bourbon that they might age for a decade. We're not looking to get that type of character from the wood. We're basically just looking for the spirit character, a little bit of char, and maybe a little bit of that oxidized aged character. Which brings us to this fine specimen here. This is Rye Day the 13th. It's our rye barley wine. We aged it in high rye bourbon barrels this year. I think it was in there for about 3 or 4 months, so it was right at that shorter side of our aging period for the first use spirit barrels. We packaged this in October, so the hot alcohol character that you're going to get off of the barrels has died down quite a bit, but you still get a good dose of bourbon. A little bit of vanilla. Oh, way too soon. Way too soon. So So who's never had Rye Day the 13th in here before? Oh, wow. What do you guys think? Okay, thumbs up. All right, that's what we like to hear. So yeah, that's a perfect example of a first use barrel for us. You have to design a specific beer for a specific barrel. For that, we did high rye bourbon barrels. We actually did a rye barley wine to go into those. So, kind of playing off of that. The spiciness really isn't there like you would think of out of a like a classic rye beer, that spicy rye character, and that has to do with the aging process. One of the other reasons we like to age our beers in the barrels, some people, and literally everybody has a different take on this. There's no wrong way to do it as long as you're making good beer. Our philosophy is if it's in there a little bit less time, it's going to hold up better in a package. A lot of people like to pick up these beers, maybe pick up 3 of them, drink one now, drink one in 6 months, and these are going to age better if they've been in a barrel a little bit less time. The longer they're exposed to that oxygen, just from the porous wood and everything, you'll start to see those stale characteristics develop earlier. In a big beer like this, it might take a year, it might take 2. It really depends. So then that moves us on to our second use barrels. Those are beers that we're putting into a barrel that we just, like, for example, we actually have a beer going in the barrels that this was in originally. We're looking for more subtle, more subtle bourbon character, a little bit more of a nuanced beer out of that. It's not going to be this in-your-face bourbon barrel-aged beer. It's going to have a little bit more of an oxidized character because we are going to age those beers a little bit longer. Really makes a more complex product in the end. So that's what we like to do with the second use barrels.
I'm curious what kind of flavors everybody's getting. We got a lot of newer beer people in the room, and maybe have never had anything quite like this. So what do you guys taste besides bourbon? Sugar cane, vanilla, raisin, sugar cane.
Definitely like a molasses. Yep.
There's nothing else put in here, though, right? There's no flavoring agent per se.
There is no flavoring. A hearty bit of rye, which makes for a nice long brew day. And then we actually brew it. It is brewed with brown sugar, so there is brown sugar in it. That goes into the boil. That definitely contributes to that molasses kind of sugary character. Very, very full-bodied beer, so you're going to get a lot of that sweetness. And then that honey, like that oxidized kind of honey character, will probably develop over time. That's one of those characters that it gets, a hint of as it comes out of the barrels, and that aging process, those are some of the flavors that are going to be accentuated with that for sure.
Anybody that just thinks it's kind of gross? These guys don't care. I'm just curious how many people not
Just not a barley wine fan.
yeah, I mean, if it's not your palate,
That's it. Get this guy out.
So the good news is, we've got some very different styles of beer that are going to be coming out here in a little bit. So we've definitely got, I won't say something for everybody, because if you truly hated barrel-aged beers, we wouldn't. But we do have some different stuff coming out later in the night. So yeah. Moving on, I guess. So for our, I actually have a nice little sheet here that tells me all this, because people are always like, "Oh, you should know all that off the top of your head," and it's like, you should, because you made it. But you also make, 40 different beers. 9% alcohol, 35 IBUs. It was in barrels for 3 months. So I said 3 to 4 months. I was a little long on that. Barley wine aged in high rye bourbon barrels.
Is High Rye a brand?
High rye is a type of bourbon. So it's It's going to be, and so you're going to say, oh, you should know this too. You're probably right. It's a certain percentage rye. It's a bourbon that is legally has to be a certain percentage of rye in the mash.
You can say anything because I have no idea.
Oh, that's fantastic. So as they make high rye bourbon, no, I'm just kidding. We were looking for we've made this beer twice. This is the second time we've made it. It was our first anniversary beer in 2013. We have not made it since. That one was actually a slightly different recipe, and it was aged in rye whiskey barrels. So, we're just trying to diversify that a little bit. This year, we're going to make it again. We may use different barrels. We're not necessarily going to get the exact same high rye bourbon. We're just kind of trying to stick with the theme. We're going to find some rye, some rye whiskey, rye bourbon, whatever, to use for that. Maybe maple syrup barrels has 50%. Hey, what do you think of that? Yeah. Talk to the sales guys. Get them on board. So this moving along, second use barrels. Oh, you got to, yeah.
What is the basic style that you put into the barrel? Rye, IPA?
It was a rye barley wine, so 9% with about an 8-degree Plato for the finishing gravity. To some people that may mean more than others. If anybody homebrews or knows more about that, basically it means it's got a lot of sweetness left. I mean, so for an example, some like our wheat beer, for example, the original gravity, so when we start before we ferment, is only 10 degrees Plato, and it ferments down to like 1.5. So for Rye Day the 13th, it started at like 26 and went down to 8. So you've got a lot more body, a lot more sweetness left, which is possibly what you didn't like about it. We heard some people saying it tastes like sugar cane or things like that, and you're gonna get some of those strong, sweet characters out of it. But yeah, any other questions on that one before we move on to the next guy we got going? All right. So this is a perfect example of our second use barrels. So this is 4 more years. It was a kettle soured beer, aged in second use bourbon barrels. We brewed it with honey and raspberries, so you're going to get a little bit of tartness. Like I said, more subtle. So you're not going to get that big sweet character. You're not going to get a huge bourbon character off of it. It's going to be a nice, complex. This is totally a wine drinker's type of beer. Like a wine drinker could come in and probably really appreciate this. So if you go, man, you are cruising. Are you following? Go back a couple pictures. Go way back. Go back like 5 pictures. Assistant. There we go. Right there. 3 pictures. So this is actually while we were making this beer right here. That is a picture of the kettle. So what you see floating on top is bacteria. Drink up. So we actually soured this beer using Greek yogurt. So we transferred it into the kettle. We heated up to 180 degrees to kill off anything that could be living in there at all. Chill it back down to 115 degrees, and then we just dosed it with literally tubs of Chobani yogurt. And does that look appetizing or what? So the main bacteria we're looking for in there is the lactobacillus. There's a handful of strains of lactobacillus in any yogurt any Greek yogurt that you're going to buy. Basically, that's just going to take the sugars, and instead of turning the sugar into alcohol, it literally creates acid. So it becomes more acidic as it goes. This beer is not very sour as far as a sour beer is concerned. If people are, I'm sure people in here are used to drinking some sours, and you're just like, this is more of a subtle tartness, but it does come from that souring process. Oh, that's good. So again, honey and raspberries, aged it in the bourbon barrels. This is, again, like I was talking about, we aged this for a little bit longer. We're looking for a little bit more of that oxidized character. It's not going to be a big spirit character, and you're going to have to really sip through it to kind of get all the complexity that's going to come out of it. What are people thinking? What are you feeling on this? Yeah, it just tastes like straight yogurt, raspberry yogurt. All right, so who doesn't like this one? I was going to say same guy. It's the guy behind him. That's fair. But you liked the last one, right? Okay, good. All right. And I do tell this to people. We make 20 styles of beer, so there's something for everyone. Yeah, I'll go ahead and... Sorry, I'm much better at brewing beer than I am at talking about things, so sorry. ABV, 8.5%. The IBUs are 20, so significantly lower than the last beer we were drinking. Much more approachable. Yes? This is not dry hopped. So I've had some dry hopped sour beers, and I could see what you're saying. I definitely could see that kind of coming through. This one was only in barrels for 5 months, so a little bit longer than what we're doing for our first use for the spirit character. Not incredibly long. We're not trying to, we're not trying to really pick up like the oakiness of the barrel. Like maybe if it was like a saison, we've done some saisons and we left those in the barrels for almost a year in wine barrels. They're going to be, as the temperature changes, the liquid will get absorbed into the pores and pushed back out. You'll get that similar character you would to aging a wine for a very extended period of time. You'll get some of those tannins. Again, that's not really what we're going for in this beer. Yes?
What's this beer called?
4 more years. At this point in our lives, take it how you want it. But it was actually our 4th anniversary beer we released shortly before the election in November. So we kind of had that going, and then however you love it or hate it, we're in it for 4 more years. There's a lot of ways to apply it. So say you should all buy 4 of them and have one every year until the next election. There you go. I like this. I like the way this guy thinks. Any other questions on that one? Yeah. So honestly, this was a very experimental beer for us. We've never done anything like it. It was actually our first kettle soured beer. It was our first fruit beer. So definitely some variables we don't necessarily know about. We don't have a background in this. I would say you could pick up a few bottles and try one in about 6 months, and if you're really liking it, drink the rest of them. If you think it could benefit from more age, save the next one for 6 more months. It's definitely a beer you can age, and I think it's gonna oxidized, slightly It's subtle compared to the last one. Like some people were saying, strong vanilla and stuff like that, which are kind of those oxidized characters that you're going to get out of a beer like this. This one has obviously it was brewed with honey, so it's got a little bit of that honey character going on. But you can kind of start tasting that oxidized character, a little bit of sherry wine type of. So if you age this for another year, I think it'd be a great beer to sip on. Well, I'm glad you like it. So it looks like just about everybody's getting moved on with our next beer here, so we'll start talking a little bit about blending. So for blending, Nick ruined my joke, but here, because he got to this slide so early, but so blending days are interesting days. You do want to make sure you eat a good breakfast. We're talking about 12% beer, 20 barrels of it. So we've got 20 wooden barrels of it, and we literally have to taste every single one to pick which ones that we want to use. Granted, we're taking pretty small samples, but you can definitely get on a pretty good buzz in the morning without realizing it. So, so basically what we're doing at that point, we're tasting every single barrel, first of all, to make sure, and we do this for every single barrel-aged beer we do before we would transfer it out of the barrels into our bright beer tank. We're going to taste every single barrel, make sure there's no infections, make sure there's no off flavors. Obviously, before we blend that together, we don't want to ruin the whole batch. So the hard part is thinking like, okay, this isn't my favorite barrel I've ever tasted, right? Like, you know, you have one that you're just like, oh yeah. Like if the whole beer tasted exactly like this, I would be the happiest man on earth. Unfortunately, with the way things go, you know, the different variables, the different barrels, you're going to have a very broad range of flavors. And I say that, you know, they're all going to taste similar, but you're going to pick up on ones like just super oxidized, and you're saying like, man, if this was the whole lot of the beer, I'd be disappointed because this is so oxidized. I don't think it's going to be the profile we were going for. But you have to remember that that's blended in with these 3 barrels that you said, oh, this is like the best thing I've ever tasted, and they don't taste oxidized at all. So you've got to weigh all these options, and it's definitely tricky. There are people who are much better at it than I am. We've actually only blended 1 beer. Everything else has been full single batch. Everything goes into 10 wooden barrels. We taste them all. If none of them taste infected, they all get put in the same bright beer tank, and that's the blend, and that's it. With Black Breath, which I believe everybody should have by now, this is the first beer we've actually done subsequent batches of different beer blended together to make the final product. So this was mostly in the Jamaican rum barrels we were talking about earlier. They came in super fresh, super wet, still had a little bit of rum in them. We transferred directly into those, and then we needed to change the character a little bit, so we brewed another batch of beer and put that into third-use barrels. For us, third-use barrels are going to be mainly just for aging beer in. We're not looking for a huge character to come out of them. We just want a beer that's going to be relatively the same age, something that we're going to be able to blend up with the main portion of the batch of beer that we're going for. So this right here is our Black Breath. It's an imperial stout aged in rum barrels, 60% rum barrels, and then 40% in those third-use barrels like I was just talking about. I know someone's going to ask me in about 10 seconds, so here we go. The 12% alcohol, 45 IBUs. If you had this beer last year, I don't know if who had this beer, or I guess it was a little over a year ago. Who's ever had this beer before the first batch of it? Okay, one of our sales guys and the guy in the orange shirt. Sweet. This is a little bit different. I mean, it's slightly more bitter, and it's a little bit different. And again, that comes from we literally had different barrels. Same beer was brewed, went into barrels, and the barrels are going to give it a character that is unique. And then, of course, the blend. Myself, Nick, and some of our sales staff got together, and we said, "What's the beer that we want to make? How are we going to make this product something truly unique?" So we came up with this, and I hope that you guys like it. Nick, why don't you talk to us about this beer, Nick?
Drink up, people.
So, maybe this is a bad idea. I'll say it. So there was a review on Untappd that said doesn't hide the rum very well, and I didn't say anything back, of course. But I wanted to say our goal was to absolutely not hide the rum. So if you're getting a lot of rum, that's exactly what we were going for, and I hope that you are. A nice, truly rum aroma on the front end. You get a little bit of like dark chocolate. Finishes it out decently bitter, but it's not over the top. Some serious vanilla character, I think, in the middle there. What are people liking? What do you like about it? Of amaretto? Okay. Say it. Say it in the mic, Nick. Don't say it to me.
Does it work?
No. He was saying some dark fruit like.
When I drink black breath, the more that it warms up, I kind of get like a dark fruit characteristic.
Mm-hmm. Plum.
Yeah. That's where I could see that.
So, not to plug another event that we have later this week, but if you are getting some sweet fruit characters out of that, that's great. We did a pilot batch of this. We did a coffee version and a cherry and cacao nib version, which we will have exclusively at a tasting this Friday night. If anybody wants to drink more of this stuff, you're gonna have to come to Illinois. So check out our Facebook page, and you can see where all of our events that are going on. But it's actually I've had people tell me that the cherry and cacao nibs version is they love it way more than the regular version. So I'm just saying. So if you want to try it, come out. We're gonna yes. We do not have a tasting room, unfortunately. We're production only. You know, we just don't have the facility for it, and being in Breese, there's really not exactly the clientele for a full tasting room. Ma'am, I will give you our owner's phone number, and if you can convince him, we would love that. So we would love to have a tasting room. You know, maybe down the road we will have a satellite location that carries all of our beers and is truly our tasting room. Hopefully, but at this point we do not.
Can you guys tell us a little bit about future plans?
Oh,
Where are you guys going to be in 5 years?
in 5 years, I'll probably be dead. No, I'm just kidding. So the brewery's growing. Obviously, earlier Chad said, it's not going to be hard to go out and pick up these beers for your homework. We are at a lot of places in St. Louis. Our goals are to keep growing our core brands, extending, going deeper in St. Louis truly, but then extending, throughout the rest of the state. Winning more awards. Where'd it go? So we did win a couple of awards last year. Our goals are obviously to keep our beer at that level and kind of move into a place where we're one of the top breweries making beer in the Midwest. I mean, we don't want to settle for anything less than that. I think we'll see how that process goes. So after blending or anything of these natures, we will go ahead and send things over to the packaging line. Packaging on all of our beers is pretty much the same, whether it's, excuse me, I skipped over some important things about all these awesome specialty ingredients. So in the last beer that we had, we were talking about some honey that we brewed it with. We literally got 50 pounds of honey from a local beekeeper. So when we've ordered honey for other beers that we've made and just brought in like a couple of 5-gallon tubs, and you just dump them in, no problem. And we're like, let's go local. Let's do this local. So contacted a guy in Lebanon, actually, and this is what he could come up with for us. So we stood over the boil kettle and, just kind of, I think those are 1 pound each. So there was 50 of them. So, the joys of going local. So we used some specialty ingredients. This was actually added into the boil. Some of our specialty ingredients are added into primary fermentation, like raspberries. So I remember this day very very clearly. We were packaging beer. Normally when we're packaging beer, we're not brewing a beer, but we were kind of in a We were in a pinch, and so Nick was kind of running things in the packaging room. I was brewing a batch of beer, and I'm running all back and forth. And as we're knocking out, which would be transferring the beer from the boil kettle to the fermenter, we're chilling that down and transferring it in, and it's got to be done in a certain amount of time. So, without the help of my assistant, I was running around very hectically. And one of the bags of fruit puree broke while I was standing on top of that tank. And yeah, so it is not blood. Actually, that tank is stuffed filled with zombies. No. So, those are just some of the fun things that can happen. But so we do add for all of our specialty ingredients. We don't use extract or flavorings. We use true, that's 100% raspberry fruit puree that we get in 50-pound bags. I would say about 87% of that bag went into the fermenter, which was actually pretty good. So, those are some of the ingredients. And then for mint and julep, which we'll get to in just a couple minutes here, I think, we added spearmint leaves, but we did that actually after it came out of the barrels. So we did that in the bright beer tank. So when that beer was released, people, a lot of the comments were things like toothpaste, mouthwash, things of that nature. I will say that obviously some people liked it because we did win an award at FOBAB this year for it, which we're really excited about. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Festival of Barrel-Aged Beers up in Chicago. It's an event put on by the Illinois Craft Brewers Guild. We took bronze, so we were pretty excited being a small brewery with a pretty small barrel aging program, that we're trying to grow to win an award out there. We were pretty excited. So this is just another picture. So we're just transferring, that's actually transferring mint julep into the bright beer tank before we added the spearmint leaves. We got a couple pictures of packaging we can show here. So like I said, all of our beers are packaged the exact same way, whether it's a barrel-aged beer or not. What you see there is actually liquid nitrogen is being dosed in, and it's purging all the oxygen out of the bottles. We run, as you heard at the very beginning, we're historically a soda packaging company. So the packaging equipment for those are different. The fillers are, you don't have the concern of oxygen in the product with soda that you do with beer. So we actually use an old soda filler to fill all of our beer product. We just purge it with nitrogen first since we don't have a regular CO2 purging system. Some people like packaging better than others. Again, our good friend Nick Bafano. We're not required to wear those hair nets. He just likes them. It keeps his hair in place. So, I'm just kidding. We are. So, just some more packaging. And then the only difference will be that we wax dip all of our barrel-aged beers. That would be the child proofing that you heard about just a few moments ago. So this is what I'll tell you. Create a really, you have to make a really good a method for it. So I have a pretty good method because I'll tell you what, our wax is way too thick. Just it is, and we've tried a couple of different suppliers for that. One was based off of cost, one was based off of how fast it melts. So we've had some different waxes, and some were thinner and thicker than others. We just on this beer right here finished off the really thick stuff. You see how thick that is. So we will be investigating some new options to make things easier for you. But if you do have a good approach, this is how I like to open them. Do a couple of cuts in here with the knife, then just go in with the opener, and you should be good. But I would suggest not doing it if you're fairly inebriated. So this is wax dipping. There are some serious accidents that can happen with wax dipping. And so we usually just take those home and drink them. But yeah, so looks like you're all getting poured mint julep. That was the beer I was just talking about that we won at FOBAB with. You want to pop to the next one there? And so this is the Festival of Barrel-Aged Beers where we were up in Chicago. We entered, yeah, look at that. This must be my favorite shirt. We entered 4 beers. We won with one of them. We were pretty excited about it. It's a pretty cool event. This is my only hat. Just kidding. But it's the only one I wear. So we got some beer nerds in here, right? All right, so if I said like Samuel Adams Utopias, you people would be like, oh, sounds ridiculously overpriced, right? You have one? Okay, cool. So I'm not in a financial position to own a bottle of that. There you go. So just to talk a little bit about this event where we won our medal, and apparently, what's your name, man? Daniel. Daniel seems to be the only one who knows what the Utopias are. You know. So they actually had a variant, as rare as Utopias are. They actually had a variant that was aged on cherries that they had at this event, and so we were able to try it, which was very cool. But that's just kind of to say it's a pretty unique event. We were really happy to be there, and even more excited to have won a medal for this beer right here. This is actually the original batch. So this is the original batch of this beer that we brewed last spring. Well, we packaged last spring. We brewed sometime in 2015. We are re-releasing it before the Kentucky Derby this year. This is, to my knowledge, the only place that has it right now. So we basically stopped distribution of that to save half of that back for a re-release of the original batch that we won the medal with. And for this event, we went in and pulled out a keg and some bottles. So we're pretty excited to be sharing this with you, as it's not readily available right now. You will notice it doesn't smell like toothpaste. The mint has definitely died down over the last year of being in a bottle, close to a year of being in a bottle. It's another barley wine, sorry. So you've got that, full body, nice and sweet. Little bit of vanilla, but it really is dominated still by that mint character. You get a little bit of bourbon. This was again another first use bourbon barrel. Old Forester barrels. Yes. Sorry? See, and I liked that guy. I liked him for a minute. No. It is. So after you brush your teeth, slosh a little bit around and take a couple sips, and you should be good. So the specs on this, 11% alcohol, 30 IBUs. This one was in the barrels for 6 months, so right at that longer period for us for the spirit barrel character. I will say about, obviously about a year ago when we packaged it, it had a lot more alcohol on it. You could really smell that. And so for maybe for some people in here who haven't done a lot of cellaring or anything, you can really expect that character to change over time. Any questions about the mint julep or?
What do you guys think of this one? Awesome. Yeah, I see some weird faces. Interesting. Who really thinks it's awesome? Who loves it? Who hates it?
That's it? That's incredible. So when we first released this, it was like, I'm sure a lot of you have the Untapped or whatever, checking a lot of beers. When we first released this was probably our worst received beer that we have ever made. People, like I said, some people, it was 50-50. It was either people really loved it, or it was like, this is the worst thing I've ever tasted in my entire life. So I guess you gotta like spearmint, but we're pretty happy with it, especially with the way it's aging. So if you're looking for more beers to age over there, I'd say this one in another year will be fantastic. That is probably true. Well, true. It is 11%, I believe. Like 28. uh, so so this was definitely an experimental beer for us. That's actually the category we won the bronze medal in, was for experimental. Oh, I like where you went with that. So we had never done anything. I mean, I personally had never done anything with, different spices and stuff like that on the back end. I'd brewed a little bit with spices in the boil or stuff like that. But for something steeped directly in the bright tank, we'd never done it. So we really had no starting place on this, on like, how many pounds of dried spearmint leaves do you steep in 17 barrels of beer? And it was like, there wasn't like a good research. Like, IBUs, you can say, okay, how many hops do I add? Well, what's the alpha acids? And it's a very easy science. And with this, it was definitely an experimental process. My guess is we will probably make this beer again at some point in our lives. But for this year, we've got the original batch to re-release, which we're pretty excited about. So I hope that too many of you didn't hate it, that didn't raise your hands, because you're yes.
Isn't it nice going home and smelling like spearmint? Seriously? You probably did, right?
Oh yeah.
As long as you don't smell like bourbon too, it's okay.
That is the key, So that's pretty much all we had for you for the stuff that I was prepared to speak on. Did anybody have any questions about barrel-aged beers or what we do or